Dallas Famous podcast is supported by the Mullen & Mullen Music Project. The Music Project was created by Mullen & Mullen Injury Law Firm to champion the independent music scene in North Texas. I'm Andrew Sherman. I'm a Texas transplant who has always been in pursuit of art as a career. I've played in bands, pursued an acting career in Hollywood, but I found it behind the lens of a camera here in Dallas, Texas. I was born in New York, I've lived in Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, but I love Dallas. There's a magical artistic scene in Dallas that mostly goes unnoticed to the outside world. This podcast is focused on what makes it so special and the people who make it thrive artistically. If you don't live here, and even if you do, you might not have heard of them. This is the Dallas Famous Podcast.
So who you gonna be? Who you gonna be when you're all grown up? Who you gonna be? Who you gonna be when you're all for us? Yeah.
This week on the Dallas Famous Podcast, we sit down with Christopher Holt, a longtime staple of the Dallas music scene and a guitarist. From his work with local legends like Sorta, The Slack, and Bastards of Soul, to touring with rock icons like Mike Campbell, Henley, and Max Weinberg. And now, he's an official member of the Eagles. Chris has carved out a career defined by versatility, tone, and heart. We talk band life, guitar heroes, and what it's like to step into one of the most iconic roles in American rock history. Chris has played with everybody, but he's still the most down-to-earth guy in the room. I know you're going to love this. Here it is. Welcome back to the Dallas Famous Podcast. I'm sitting in Chris Holt's studio in Lake Highlands. Thank you for having me, and thanks for being on the show, Chris.
Hey, thank you, Andrew.
So, Chris, I almost feel like you're the epitome of Dallas Famous. It's like, you're beyond Dallas Famous. I follow a Facebook fan page. You're one of the few friends I have that has one that is, people are actively very passionate about your work, which is cool.
I was really floored when the people who put that page together approached me and said, "Hey, we're going to do a fan page for you." And I was
like, they came to you?
Well, yeah, they're fans that I've known for a few years since I joined Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs, and they're great. They're just really supportive, and they asked for my approval, and I said sure. I said I'm not going to post on there or anything.
Right.
I said I'm not going to be a fan. I'm not going to be on my own fan page.
Right.
But they're great. And it's awesome. The people who are on it. I get updates regularly that people are enthusiastic about it, and I'm like, that's great.
It's pretty cool.
It's got like 1,000+ members. I can't believe it.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And it's like I keep seeing it come up, and I'm like, it's funny. I'm like, oh, this is Chris promoting. No, this is not Chris. This is people, just fans of Chris. That's awesome.
I'm terrible at social media in general. I joked I've got a team of people working with me on this new record release. And I joked to them, I was like, I have posted more on social media in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 2 years. Because I just don't have any social media skill or interest, really.
Yeah. Well, and also you're busy. Where do you have the time?
Yeah. But I've just kind of had to, there's singles out and there's an album coming out and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, God, now I got to do the social media game.
Well, might as well right at the top. What's the name of the album, name of the single?
Okay, so the album is called Across the Milky Way, and it's coming out May 9th on Idol Records. And
cool.
We have 2 singles out right now from the first one's called I Can Only Be Myself, and the second one is called That Magic Feeling. And there'll be another one coming out in a few weeks. So. Do
you have guests on there with you?
Well, so the entire record I made here in this room, with the exception of the drums, which I did over at Pleasantry Lane with Salim and John Dufalo Engineering. I played all the instruments on the record myself. So anytime I do a solo album, I always just play everything myself. Right. I usually will start with, if it's a guitar song, I'll start with a guitar track or a piano track and just cut it to a click. And then I just layer all the instruments and voices myself. It's all real instruments. It's not, it's not loops or anything like that. So it takes a little while, but I did it here on a tour break last year. And, that's what I like doing whenever, because I've been in tons of bands where there's compromise involved. So, it's nice to have a solo project where you can just kind of make all your own choices and do what you want to do, and hopefully people like it.
Is this like the evolution of like how you started when you were first recording yourself? Like, is this sort of like something you've been doing this way? Or
yeah, ever since I started writing songs 30 some odd years ago, I had a little 4-track, and I would sit there and try to figure out. I mean, I actually was doing that before I had a 4-track. When I was in my bedroom, you know, I'm old, so, you know, I would sit in my bedroom in the 80s and I would get 2 boom boxes.
Yes.
And I would like try to record. I'd record a little guitar thing, and then I'd kind of like, it was these little makeshift ways of overdubbing onto cassettes. And then eventually I got a 4-track, and then it was like, oh my God, I have 4 tracks to work with here.
That was probably like just the magic
and
moment.
then when it became digital, you know, I don't know, 20 some odd years ago, I remember before I ever had Pro Tools, I got Cool Edit Pro or whatever, and then you could just stack tracks. I thought that was the greatest thing ever, because then I was like, oh, I can create, you know, Beach Boys harmonies now.
Right by yourself. Yeah.
So it's always been a fun thing for me to kind of do my own thing and see what happens. A lot of it just kind of stays in the vault, you know. But, But this is my 4th solo album, so, you know, I really do enjoy doing it. So.
You have a lot of instruments in here, and you play everything on the album. Like, what was the first instrument that you started with?
It was a guitar. I was being a kid of the 80s. I was really into MTV like everybody else was, and I would just sit there and watch all day long. And I just became obsessed with but the sound of the guitar. I always kind of go back to Limelight by Rush and Crazy Train. Those, like, it's 81. These were the songs where I was like, what is that sound? I thought the guitar tone on Crazy Train was the craziest thing I'd ever heard, you know? And so I really became obsessed with the sound and then the look of guitar players. And so I begged my parents for a guitar for years, and then finally 85, when I was in 6th grade, that's when I got my first guitar. And so I started with guitar, and eventually once I felt pretty good about my guitar playing, I started moving on to teaching myself other instruments. I have no real formal training at all.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn that, actually.
Yeah. I know a lot of musicians that were schooled from a young age, and I'm a little bit envious that they had that experience, because that was just something that it's not that my parents weren't interested in doing that for me. It was just something that I was like, oh, you know, I didn't want to be in an orchestra or a band. I wanted to play guitar, and I just wanted to kind of learn it on my own. But I did have some really great mentors along the way, most notably the great Sam Swank. Sam kind of took me under his wing and for a few years showed me what I was doing wrong, and then pushed me out the door and said, now go play, dude. Go figure it out.
Nice. You know, I don't normally ask questions like this, but I know your sound is really important. Like, at what point were you starting to like dial in your sound? Like, do you feel like you've got it now? And does that change from band to band?
It definitely changes from band to band, but yeah, I do have kind of a thing, and I kind of have a comfort zone. And as an electric guitar player, it's definitely, you know, old school tube amps and stomp boxes. You know, I have yet to figure out, you know, fractal audio or the Kempers and all this. I mean, I've got one of these Line 6 modelers, and I've experimented with that a little bit and actually gotten some great sounds. And some of that stuff made it onto this new record.
Oh, wow.
You know, and I used them when I did those live shows during the pandemic. I mean, the live streaming shows during the pandemic. I was a lot of times just using this modeler rather than cranking an amp in a room.
Oh, right.
But yeah, I think for me, I've never been very good with gear. Like, I couldn't tell you what kind of tubes are in my amp.
Interesting. Okay, I would not have guessed that.
I couldn't. Yeah, well, I know tons of musicians that are just obsessive gearheads that know every single thing. They know exactly how their guitar is wired. They know the exact radius of the nut or you know, the neck or whatever. Right. And I'm just like, whatever, man. I obsess over music itself, and I just kind of adapt to whatever gear I've got. You know, I love guitars, so I've got tons of them, and each one kind of responds a little differently, and I have lots of amps that I like to experiment with. But generally what I like is an amp that has enough clean headroom that I can turn it up and it stays clean. And then I like to kind of adjust with stomp boxes. So I typically like to have a small pedal board and a loud tube amp. Right. Of course, I can't get away with being super loud anymore. You know, back in the day, I was the loudest guitar player in Texas. You know, it'd be like they'd see me coming in and they go, "Oh Jesus, here comes Holt." You know, darn.
Just because you wanted to, like, you just like the power, or? That's
just what I thought was. I played in bands where the guitar was kind of the focal point, and I thought, I just never knew any better. I never knew that you could get a good tone being quiet.
Right.
I just thought, and I mean, tube amps, you do kind of have to turn them up, you know,
True.
and I didn't know anything about attenuators. So it took me a long time to really develop what I think was good tone. A lot of times it was just big and loud and in your face. You know, I mean, I started out playing with Marshalls, you know? And then eventually it evolved into Fenders, and you know, I'm pretty comfortable with Fender amps. Those have always been.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I actually have
Yeah.
one of those at home. Okay, well, this is Dallas Famous, so I know it's Canton, right? Is that where you started? Is that right?
No, I grew up.
Dallas.
I grew up in Dallas. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, born and raised here.
oh gosh, my research sucks. I should know that. And then, I mean, I feel like
You may have read that about the other Chris Holt. You know, there's another Chris Holt.
is there?
Yeah, so the reason that all my solo stuff is under Christopher Holt is because and I'm not talking shit on this guy at all, but so I started putting out my solo albums 20 years ago. In fact, my first solo album, Summer Reverb, came out 20 years ago next month, which is crazy.
Oh, nice.
And but about 10 or 12 years ago, there was a guy, and he was around here, named Chris Holt, who's a country singer, who started putting out music.
Who's from Canton, Texas, by the way.
He must be from Canton. And so anyway, there was this kind of confusion there, and then people would post his picture on shows that I was doing, and I was going, that's not me. And then he and I actually had an online exchange at one point. And I was kind of smug about it, actually. I was like, look, man, I'm the Chris Holt everybody knows. It was kind of a dick move, but I was also just like, well, look, I've been doing this a long time. I've won a bunch of awards around here, and you know, but so just to avoid that confusion, because it was out there on iTunes and, you know, and streaming services where it was like Chris Holt, and there were two different Chris Holts. I just changed my entire back catalog to be Christopher. So when I did this album called Stargazer 8 years ago, that was under Christopher, and so now all of my solo stuff is Christopher.
Well, I mean, it's less confusing, I guess, unless you're doing research on AI.
So now we can coexist and there's no conflict. You know?
Right.
And we don't sound alike either. So, you know, I think when people hear that and they go, because like Steve Ferroni from the Knobs, you know, pulled up one of his songs and he goes, "Is this you? Chris, is this you?" And I was like, "No, it's not me. Does that sound like this? That doesn't sound like me." And he just goes, "Well, this is Chris Holt." And I said, "Well, I'm Christopher Holt."
You should know better.
Well, but you know, I mean, everybody calls me Chris.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Is,
right.
I mean, even on my Facebook page, it's Chris Holt. But then my artist page is Christopher Holt Music.
Right. Well, it's like in SAG where like I just saw like Tiffany Thiessen, and I was like, wait, where did the Amber go? It's like, well, she was only Amber because there was another Tiffany Thiessen probably.
What are the odds?
In SAG. Well, true. But Tiffany's a pretty good actor name, I guess, or less people.
Sure.
Sure. So we had an image of you messing around on your own. When did you start kind of playing with other people, other musicians?
Well, so I started playing in bands in high school, and then when I went to college, I was at OU, and I met a bunch of musicians there and started playing with them.
Did you know you wanted to be a musician when you went?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I played my first high school band. I played my first gig when I was 16. My first gig, like on a stage in front of people with a band, and I knew I never wanted to do anything else after that. You know, it was, and it wasn't because of, you know, it's not about adulation or like being in front of the fans or whatever, but it's just that magic that comes from playing music live. Yeah. That to me was that was heroin. That was a drug that was more addictive than anything else.
Do you prefer live too, or is it just
totally
different?
I like both. I like both, you know, but recording is such a different beast, you know. Recording, it's just it can bog you down and you can get super frustrated, whereas live it can be very spontaneous. I think at its best, when you're playing live music, you have both spontaneity and structure. Right. You know, like it's hard to kind of do both. I mean, I don't think I could ever, I don't think I'm good enough to be a jazz musician, like a real jazz musician, but I like straddling that line. I played in a jam band for a long time. And the thing is, I was never into jam bands really. Like, I mean, and I love the Dead, and I know you love the Dead.
Yeah.
But what I love about the Dead isn't so much the jamming as like, I love in particular Jerry's songs. You know,
Yeah,
I think
sure.
especially from about 69 to about 74, like that, or 75 even.
Yeah.
That period to me is just like, God, there's some great songs.
He's just on fire at that point. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm getting off topic, but I do love improvisation, and I very much enjoy seeing what happens. I think that's one of the things that Mike Campbell really likes about playing with me, is because Mike loves to improvise. He loves to go off script.
Oh, okay.
Like Mike will make a set list for a show, and then he'll walk out, and literally before we've played a note, he'll lean into me and go, "Hey, we're going to do Rainy Day Women." And I just go, "Okay, like right now?" And he just launches into it, and it's not even on the fucking set list.
Is it even a song you guys have rehearsed? Or?
No, a lot of times sometimes it will be stuff we know, but sometimes he'll just launch into some Chuck Berry song that he's in the mood to play, and it's like, follow Mike.
Oh, wow.
Mike's going off the cliff. Let's go right off. And I think he figured out early on that I was not afraid to go off the cliff.
Right.
So there's something really, I mean, it's a little stressful sometimes, but you know.
God, to me, that just sounds very stressful. That's not where my head is at.
I did quite a few runs with Max Weinberg, doing Max Weinberg's jukebox, pre-pandemic, and then even post-pandemic, before he went back out with Bruce. But Max's shows are completely improvised. There's a master list of like 300 songs, and you just have to know them all. And Max takes requests from the audience, so sometimes it'll be just like the audience saying, "Hey, American Girl," and he'll turn to us and go, "All right, let's do American Girl," and then you just go.
Wow.
So that's like the most stressful situation I've been in on stage, where it's like, what song? And that's when I actually got an iPad for the first time, because I was like, because we would have to do songs that maybe I had never done before. I mean, but part of the reason I got the gig is because I know so many songs. I mean, I kind of know a lot of pop history from, the 60s through the 90s or whatever. But that is a challenging gig for sure.
Jeez, that sounds like it. Yeah. Man, you've played with a lot of great, like, legends even.
I always just say I'm lucky, I kind of am in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I feel, both from publicly knowing you and just even listening to you, it's like I can tell you just love to play music. And I feel like it's like one band would never have been enough for you, because there's different things you want to do in different situations. Like you can't improvise in certain situations you're in.
I think if one band had been really successful early on, it might have been one of those things where I'm like, this is my band, this is my identity. Especially if I was in charge of it, because for years and years I was the band leader. I was the one writing the songs. I was the one spearheading all of that stuff, or at least on a musical level. I've never been particularly good at booking or promoting or any. Well, I'm a horrible self-promoter, but I would always be the band leader. And so anytime, through the jam band years especially, I was very focused on being in one band. But unless it was a cover band that paid my bills, like I played in Hard Night's Day for years.
Okay.
And that was because that was my job. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this because the cover bands are making good money, and then my original bands would be working, and we'd be playing a lot too, so we were doing okay, But it was after Olospo, Olospo broke up in like 2004. It was around then and I was about 30, and I was just like, I need to get out and get involved with the scene. And that's when I really got out and started expanding and playing a lot in Dallas. Like that's when I got in with Sorta, and that's when I started playing with Doug Burr and this band called the Jones Thing, and and then I was jumping around and playing in all kinds of cover bands, and there was a 3 or 4 year period there where you couldn't not see me out in the scene.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it does feel like you did a lot.
Yeah.
And still do a lot.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm not out playing locally as much these days.
Right.
It's mostly tour gigs.
I wanted to hold this question till later, but I just have to ask it. Were you ever in a band where you were doing Eagles songs, like a cover?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I've never done like an Eagles tribute band, but I did do a show, I don't know, it was probably a dozen years or more ago, where we did an entire night of Eagles music. And it was a friend of mine from college, this guy Wayman McAllister, who put it together. And it was an ensemble. It's very much like that Badfinger that I'm doing in Antebellum this weekend.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Yeah,
it's just an ensemble group of people, and people kind of come in and out. But it was me and Big Mike Richardson, and you know, we did a whole night of Eagles stuff. And this was right around the time I met Don Henley. You know? Okay. So, but I've played in bands for years where Eagles songs were just in the repertoire. I mean, that's the thing about the Eagles, is those songs are everywhere, and you know, there's not a song in the Eagles set that you don't know by heart.
Oh yeah.
All that stuff is stuff that I was learning in my bedroom when I was 14 years old.
So when you were learning these songs, and then were you always trying to like nail it note for note like the original?
Yeah, I mean, I just was very interested in kind of understanding how, you know, and particularly guys like, you know, Bernie Ledden and Joe Walsh and Don Felder all had distinctly different guitar styles. They were all distinctly different players. I was like, well, how does he make it sound like that? Well, Bernie's bending these strings, and then Felder's got this precision, and then Joe's just like, Joe is all swagger, like all vibe, all, you know, all funk. And that, it was fascinating to me, and I always just wanted to learn how to emulate them. This is the same thing as like trying to learn how to imitate somebody's voice. Yeah. You know, I was good at that for a long time. It was I can imitate Neil Young. I can imitate Bob Dylan. I can imitate John Lennon, you know. And so I was always interested in trying to figure out what other guitar players were doing too.
Right.
I always said that, you know, when you're coming up, you don't really develop your own style. You have to learn how to imitate. Well, not everybody has to do this, because I guess there are exceptions to the rule, but I've discovered for me, it was finding my own sound and finding my own style was all about mashing 100 other guitar players together. You know, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to take Jimmy Page, and I'm going to take Joe Walsh, and I'm going to take David Gilmour, and I'm going to take Angus Young, and I'm going to take Brian May and Lindsey Buckingham. And, you know, just the list goes on of all these players that are total heroes of mine, Mike Campbell included, and mash them all together, and eventually you sound like yourself.
Yeah.
Like that, I mean, that's what I believe is, I think I have a sound now, and I think it's because I just I ripped off all these people.
Yeah.
Not just one person.
Does that trip you out to think that, like, oh, maybe there's some 13-year-old in their bedroom that's trying to learn Chris Holt solos note for note?
I mean, I don't know. That would be crazy if that was. I mean, that'd be amazing if it was. You know, I never felt like I had that kind of reach.
Well, I mean, like, I guess it starts somewhere, right?
Yeah.
something really interesting about your story, which is, I guess, leads into the Don Henley thing, is that you were a teacher. You taught music, is that right?
Yeah. So
which blows my mind. Not to interrupt, this blows my mind because you didn't ever learn from any like traditional
right.
method, and then now you're out there and I'm guessing you're pretty good at it.
Yeah. Well, how I became a teacher was. Well, because I didn't want to get a real job. I'm not that teaching is not a real job. Teaching is most definitely a real job. But when I came home from touring, and I was around the same time that I was telling you that I started really getting out into the scene. I started working at CD World, at Mike Schroeder's CD World, the late great CD World, and then I had some friends that were working at this school called Sound Sounds, and they were teaching, and they were making money, and there was a cool vibe there. Mark Solomon was running a cool band program for young kids, and I got involved with that. And as time went on, my wife and I started having kids, and then I started phasing myself out of gigging all the time. I was going, I think, the Slack broke up, Sorta broke up. I put out a couple solo albums, and they didn't do a whole lot. And I just thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to settle into doing this. It's a good paycheck. I was like running Mark Solomon's band program, and that was so. How all that worked for me was I taught myself to read music when I was in my late 20s, and I absorbed music theory, over a period of years. Really, it was like. I always knew how to make the chords. I always instinctively knew how to find the melodies that worked and the chord combinations and the triads and all that stuff, but I couldn't identify them a lot. And eventually, you spend enough time around musicians, it's osmosis. They'll sit there and go, "Well, that's actually called a major seventh, dude." Oh, okay. Well, what's a seventh? Well, that's a dominant seventh. It's when you flat the seven. All of that stuff came to me at a little bit of a later age. But then by the time I was teaching, I dove really deep into theory and taught myself to read music, which I don't enjoy. I still you put a sheet music in front of me, I'm like, I could use it for reference, but I'm sure I'm not going to sight read on the spot and be good,
Sure.
But that's just something that I didn't do at a young age. So, I did eventually become, and I joke with a lot. I'm still friends with a lot of my former students, and I joke. I was like, I was never a good teacher. What I was good, I'm not a good teacher. I'm just a good enthusiast. What I was really good at was getting them excited about music. It wasn't that I had any sort of. I still to this day don't have a practice regimen. If you were like, teach me a lesson, I'd be like, well, okay, what do you like? I don't have a method. It's just about figuring out what gets you excited about music, and then stimulating that and being like, okay, you like this? Well, check this out. And then, and that's how I would get guitar students or piano students be like, oh, you like this song? Well, check it out. These are the chords, and look, you put these three notes together. This is exactly how that song is built. And some kids never click with that, but then others do. And it's the ones who do that end up being musicians, or at least continuing with it for years.
Sure.
So the way I met Don was because Salim Narala knew Don. So I met Don through Salim. And Don was looking for a guitar teacher for his son. And just one day I got the call. Hey, do you want to teach? I'm going to give Don your number. And I was just like, wow, okay. And then a couple days into that relationship, he asked me if I wanted to cut a guitar solo he was working on this album, Cass County. He was doing his solo album, Cass County, at the time. And I was there at his house, and he just asked me if I wanted to take a crack at this guitar solo. And I was like, yeah.
Why did he ask you? Do you know?
Because I was there, and they were working on the track, and he just, I don't know, man. I don't know what, maybe he was just testing the waters to see if I would crack under the pressure or something. I don't think he had any agenda. I think it was just, I was there, and he was like, you want to try this? And I just was like, hell yes. The ball crossed the plate, and I swung.
Yeah.
Hit the ball. Made it onto the record. And it just kind of snowballed from there. He would call me. He would call me to do things occasionally, and it culminated with me subbing a gig for Pete Thorne. Was his guitar player at the time.
Wow.
The great Pete Thorne.
Yeah.
And Pete was booked on a tour of Japan or something and was unable to do something. And Cass County was getting ready to come out, and Don asked me to go do a gig, and it went well. And so then he asked me to be in the touring band, and I was just like, how did I get here? You know, like it was just absolute magic. And it was serendipitous timing too, because I was just kind of burned out on teaching at that point. I'd come full circle. I'd gone from wanting to play. Then it was like, no, I think I want to just be a dad and teach. And then after years and years of doing that, I was kind of tired of that, and I just wanted to play.
Yeah. That's crazy. And then, I mean, I can't imagine the circles you're running in when you're playing in that band.
Yeah, it was intimidating because, you know, you suddenly are playing with like some of the best players out there, you know. I've often said that a good place to be is being the worst player in a great band. And I don't know that I was the worst, but then again, I would say I probably was, you know. You step into a band that has Stuart Smith and Scott Crago and Will Hollis and Michael Thompson and Milo Deering, you know, the genius Milo Deering in it. And you suddenly are like, oh God, I'm the worst musician in this band. But you sink or swim.
Yeah.
And that's, and I always say that I think a lot of it's not about my guitar playing so much. I mean, my guitar playing is good enough to get me in the room, but then it's about the hang. Mm-hmm. It totally comes down to the hang. It's like, yep. I'm a low key guy. I don't run my mouth. I'm not a fall down drunk. You know, I'm like, mm-hmm. You know, I fit in with those guys, and we all got along really well. And I've always gotten along great with Stuart Smith, and so that, you know. That's how I think it happens. It's luck and opportunity. It's that whole thing.
Yeah.
Luck plays a shitload into it, though.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, It wasn't like he was holding auditions. You just were there.
No. Yeah. It was just one of those things where I think there was something he liked about my vibe, and he heard me play, and he was like, "Oh, this guy can play," you know.
Yeah.
And under pressure, I did okay, and then it was like, all right, well, let's try this out, and here we are, 12 years later.
Right. I'm going to go out on a limb with my research. Did you play with Bob Dylan? Is that right?
Yeah, at a Farm Aid.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was a one-off gig, which was totally wild. We were getting ready to start a tour with Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs, and Mike called and said, Bob called, and he wants to do a surprise set at Farm Aid. He's not going to announce it. He's just going to show up, and he wants us to be the backing band. And like us, the Knobs, but with Benmont Tench on keys. So it's, you know, and we've already got Ferroni in the Knobs, so it's like, holy shit, this is Heartbreakers essentially. It's the Heartbreakers with me and Lance,
right?
And
wow, and
Bob. So yeah, it was just amazing. And you know, we talked about tons of songs, and Bob was great. He's a delightful guy. You know, I was blown away just by the opportunity to do it. And of course, you know, when you go out on stage with Bob, it's all about just watch Bob, follow Bob. Bob's gonna, you know, we didn't even know he was gonna play guitar that night. And when because we thought he was just gonna sit there on a stool and sing, and, you know, and I was working out guitar stuff. And then there was a telly sitting out there with an amp. And I think it was just kind of, you know, just in case. Mm-hmm. Bob walked out there, picked up the telly, and just started playing a riff. And then we were off, man. We were off and running. Maggie's Farm. It was like,
oh man. Oh gosh.
It was nuts, man. So we did that set with Bob, and it was just, and I couldn't even tell at the time. I was like, is this going well? I don't know. I couldn't tell because I couldn't see. But then as soon as it was over, Bob was happy. Everybody was happy. The internet exploded. Uh-huh. And I thought, oh, they're going to say we're terrible or whatever. But no, all the Bob fans went completely nuts because it was the first time he'd picked up a guitar on stage in decades, I think. And we played some of the hits. We played Positively 4th Street. You know, like we went crack, boom, dude, and Ben comes in with that Hammond organ line, and that moment was just insane. The crowd went nuts when they heard that because I don't think Bob ever plays that song.
No, I mean I saw him in L.A. and he didn't play guitar, and it was a really good,
he plays piano a lot these days.
Yeah,
you know?
And it was a really good. Well, this is actually a long time ago, but still in that range. But he had like a jazz band or something. I mean, I felt like they were just really good players, and after a while, like it just was. I couldn't really follow any of it because it just sounded like these really good musicians, and he wasn't really matching their energy, or they weren't matching his.
And Bob, as you know, always changes it up. Bob, it's that improvisational thing. Bob's never going to stick to a script. Bob's never going to do the same thing twice. I think that I think he's just constantly changing in his mind what interests him, and that was a fascinating thing to watch, is just to hear and see him turning his wheels in real time. Like, what is it that I want now? And that was, and it's a challenge, because you have to follow him, and that's equal parts terrifying and exhilarating, because you're like, because you're doing it, you're in it with, and you're like, dude, it's fucking Bob.
Legend. By a lot.
Yeah.
How did you end up with the Dirty Knobs?
So that was, again, through the Don Henley connection, because Lance Morrison, who's a really good friend of mine, was the bass player in Henley's solo band with me. So whenever we would tour with Don, Lance and I would talk. We were big buddies on the road, and he would tell me, this is 10 years ago, he would say, oh, I play in the Dirty Knobs with Mike Campbell. And at that time, Tom was still alive, Tom Petty was still alive, and the Heartbreakers were still Mike's main gig, but the Knobs were just a side project that Mike did in Los Angeles, whenever he was off the road. And Lance lives in LA, and he was like, oh man, it's so much fun. We're just a garage band. We play all kinds of fun stuff, songs that Mike writes, songs, covers, like, and I was like, oh man, I love Mike Campbell, one of my favorite guitar players of all time. You've got to introduce me to him. I want to jam with you guys. And he would always go, no, well, we got this other guy, Jason, he's a guitar player. Oh, okay, so there's two guitar players. I said, well, let me be the keyboard player, man. I'll come to LA. Oh, man, we don't need a keyboard player. Sometimes Benmont will sit in or something, Okay, fine, But over the course of, however many years, I would always just be like, hey man, you got to introduce me to Mike. Let me know if you ever, and sure as hell, he called me. I was probably 3 or 4 years ago now, that it's been going on, but he called me and he said, dude, Jason left the Knobs and we've got a tour. He was like, they had a tour booked, and he was like, Jason left and I'm giving Mike your number. And I was like, wow. No way. So the next thing you know, I'm on the phone with Mike Campbell and we're talking gear and we're talking music. And he was like, well, hey, I like your vibe. You want to come to LA and jam with us? And I was like, yeah. So I got on a plane, and then next thing I know, he was like, well, hey, you want to do these shows? We got 3 shows coming up. And so I went and did these 3 shows with him. And after that, he was just like, well, hey, you want to do the tour? And a couple days into the tour, he kind of did this whole thing where he inaugurated me, and he proclaimed me knob for life. He was like, you're in, dude, you're in. And it was wonderful, man.
That's
amazing. I thought it was the greatest thing. And Mike is awesome. He's so much fun to play with. He has this boundless enthusiasm for music. He writes hundreds of songs. Like, you wouldn't even believe how much he's just constantly writing. Huh. Yeah. So it's exciting. It's fun. Playing in the Knobs is a blast.
Yeah, right on. Let's also talk about Bastards of Soul.
Yeah.
That was a great band. It seemed like you guys were like on the upswing.
Yeah, man. So that all started around the same time. So all these things were going on in my life simultaneously. When I started touring with Don, and then I had my double album Stargazer that was coming out, and my intent was to put together a band and to try to tour. I was on State Fair Records, and I was going to try to tour behind this solo album Stargazer, because I'd put some time into making this double album, and we put it out on vinyl, and so I was going to put together a band and tour. And then I got the Henley tour, and then it was like, oh, well, sorry. I had to say, sorry, I'm going to go and tour with Don Henley. And that was just, we literally went and did like a world tour, and I was out with him for 3 years. So I never got to do any sort of real promotion behind that solo album. I was planning on following it up, but then that was when we started doing the Bastards. And the Bastards of Soul started as a cover band. It was Danny and Chad, Danny Bayless and Chad Stockslager, who wanted to do a soul band. Danny really was the brainchild behind all of it. He was like, I want to do a classic, old school, sweaty soul band playing clubs, playing these dank clubs, and like just sweating it out like the old school guys did. And I think I just talked my way into it. I was just like, well, you need me on guitar, you know, like, because those guys are my buddies. You know, Danny and I played together in Sorta. Chad Stockslager and I were, best friends for the longest time. We did our Simon and Garfunkel duo, and, you know, we were in the trenches and Hard Night Stay together, and and taught together at Sounds. So when they discovered Chadwick, when they, you know, and we knew Chadwick, that was the thing, is we knew him because he played in Murr, and he was, you know, we knew him as a bass player.
Right.
And then
I saw him in Murr first too.
Yeah. And I've known Max Hartman my whole life. You know, I've known him since we were teenagers. And, I can't really, you know, we all have kind of conflicting versions of how it actually happened, but I think it was that they were out at a bar one night and they heard Chadwick singing along to like Sam Cooke on the jukebox or something, and were like, wait, you can sing? it was something like that. Right. Everybody probably has a different version of how they came to Chadwick being the singer. But then there was a conversation, you know, let's do this soul band thing that we've been talking about, and he's going to be the guy. So we put it together, and just to force ourselves to play, we booked a gig. Danny said, all right, well, here we are. February 20th, we're going to play the Twilight Lounge or whatever, you know, and so that's 2 months away. That means we got 8 weeks, guys, 8 weeks to come up with a set. It's, you know, sink or swim, you know, you force yourself to do something, and that's how the Bastards were born. So we did like a year where we were just sweating out playing covers, you know, learning the craft, learning how the old school soul guys did it. Mm-hmm. And it was always our intent to be original. Like, we had always talked about, we're going to bring in our original songs, and we're going to transition into an original band, all originals, you know. So, and it just took a couple of years, you know, for us to really get the ball rolling there. And I was the one who brought in the first couple songs. You know, I had a song called Matter of Time, which we never did record because that was our first song. But then the second song I brought in was a song I'd written called I've Got the Key. And that one clicked. And everybody was like, all right, this is cool. Mm. And then it just snowballed from there. Danny started bringing in songs. Chad started, and, you know, Stockslager wrote all the best songs. We were all jealous of Stockslager because he just, I mean, dude, he had the best tunes. But it was you know, it was like George Martin used to call the Beatles. It was a healthy competition. You know, we were all trying to get our songs in there. And then, you know, I would bring in a song and I'd have an idea. Oh, well, it's going to be like this. But then as soon as you get the five of us in a room together, it becomes something completely different, you know, and there's frustration and there's sensation in that, because, you know, you can be selfish about how you want an arrangement to be, but when you get all those minds together and then suddenly it starts happening, there's magic there. And some of the most magical things that happened in that band were that we would write songs out of thin air. Like, we would come in, Danny would play a little bass groove or something. We have hours and hours of unreleased jamming. Mm. The Bastards, I mean, dude, we could put out, if we went into the Bastards archives, we could probably put out multiple albums of just us jamming. Chadwick improvising over the top of it. Some of it just instrumental. You know, I mean, it was really exciting to see these things come out of thin air, because we'd find something we liked and then we'd kind of refine a riff or something and find a B section. And then Chadwick would sit there and make those up. And we have several songs that were like that were written in the room on the spot. You know, 1 minute it's not there, 20 minutes later, there's a song. You know, that happened with several of the songs that were on the first album. You know, Back to the City was one of them, I think, that we and The Way It Should Be, which was one of the singles, we wrote that in 10 minutes. It just literally like that. Yeah. And I loved that, man. That was really cool, the way that built up. And then, of course, when the first album came out, we played the Kessler, and the Black Pumas show was a real game changer for us, because we just exploded in that room. Mm-hmm. And then a couple weeks later, we had the album release. We had all the plans. Everybody was talking about us, and then pandemic. Just like literally brick wall. And it was, and we were like, we didn't know what to do. You know, we just, we So after a few weeks of just getting over the shock of not being able to play, not being able to leave our houses, I was doing live stream shows. We had a band meeting on Zoom where we just said, well, we can't do anything, so why don't we just make another record? Chadwick was diabetic, so we knew that we couldn't all get in the same room. And I remember going over, and we would go over to rehearse wearing masks. It was the weirdest time, man.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. But we started writing songs, and we wrote so many songs that we thought the second record was going to be a double album. And it just wound up being that those were the final two albums. We just had so much material that we recorded. And of course, everybody knows what happened after that. It was a tragic deal, man.
Yeah. I mean, so shocking, especially because there was people with COVID passing, and then, that just came out of left field for some of us. I didn't know he was diabetic. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it was a rare condition. It wasn't COVID. It was something where, I think there were signs there that we didn't realize, because he would be short of breath, or he would be struggling to hit the notes. There were times, even in that film that came out, it's a really lovely film that Paul Levatino made, and it was just all this. None of it was supposed to be a documentary. It was just footage that had been shot of us, in the studio, on stage, making videos, doing all this stuff. And toward the end there, when we were finishing the second record, we saw some signs that he was struggling, but we didn't know, we just were like, well, what's going on with Chadwick, and then it was, guys, I can't breathe, I'm going to the hospital. And he never came back from the hospital. It was just horrible, man. Wow. And we were just in complete shock.
Yeah.
And of course, his family, it was so sad.
Yeah, really sad.
Yeah. But I'm glad that there is an audience for the music, that's what's beautiful. You go to the Kessler now and you see that beautiful mural on the wall, and there's a legacy there now, and I think that's awesome. And I love that his son Lennox will grow up and it'll be like, dude, that's your dad.
Yeah.
Your dad was a big deal. He was, he was on the cusp of being a star, because he did have that whatever that X factor was. We thought, okay, well, this band, I think we all kind of put our eggs into that basket and thought, I was 100% in, on the Bastards. I didn't join the Knobs until, after we had already gone. We knew the third album was going to come out because we had all that leftover material. Mm-hmm. But by that point, it was like, we knew, without Chadwick, it was like, well, that was the whole band. That was the whole purpose. That was the whole band was built around that. So Danny went and did Silver Skylarks, and I went and did the Knobs, and, I keep trying to get Stockslager to make a solo album, because he's just got a treasure trove of great songs. So hopefully that'll happen.
Yeah. We're getting to
I talk too much.
Oh,
man.
no,
Sorry.
that's what we're here for. No, this is great. I guess there's probably a lot of questions about the Eagles. You're a freaking member of the Eagles.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. That whole thing is it's still just like a surreal dream, really.
Yeah, no, I can't. I can relate that it's probably very unreal to you too. But specifically, what's it been like going to the Sphere?
Have you been?
No.
Okay, I thought maybe you would have seen.
I want to,
Dead
but trust me. If anyone wants to help me get there, I'll go.
It's just it's mind blowing. I don't even know how to describe it. But it took a lot of getting used to. One of the good things was that I had been there, because we knew that Stewart was probably going to we knew he was going to step down, because he had been kind of bothered by the symptoms of this for a while. And they called and asked me to be prepared to step in. And so I was able to go see a show at the Sphere. I was able to see the show and see all the content and kind of understand, and then I did some rehearsals where I got used to what the Sphere setup would be. But then, of course, when I came and did my first show, it was, it's trial by fire. Get on up there and do it. But what's crazy about that room is that, you can't have an amp on stage. And you can't have any foldback wedges on stage. It's all in-ears. And I've played with in-ears for years, so I'm used to that. I actually I'd still prefer like playing just with an amp in a room and a wedge, that's just because that's the way I like it. But when I play with Mike, I mean, he's got a wall of amps. I gotta wear ears. And when we toured with Don, we're using in-ears for all of that. So it was not that big a deal for me to adjust to using in-ears. But not having an amp on stage is a little strange. And what's crazy about the Sphere is that if you just kind of look around, you can get really disoriented.
I was going to say,
and I'm already doing so much work in that show. I do a lot of heavy lifting. I'm playing lead guitar on a ton of the material. Joe is obviously Joe, and he's got his spotlights and so much of the extended guitar soloing will be Joe, but I do so much other lead stuff through the show that, I don't have a whole lot of opportunity to look around at the room. So,
Sure.
I joke about it. It was like, did you get a good chance to look at the content? Yeah. Well, okay. Never look at it again. Right. Otherwise you're going to fall off the stage.
Right.
That's the challenges. And it's kind of weird, just because you look out into the audience. I don't look, whenever I have the opportunity to look into the audience, and, a lot of times they're not even looking at you because they're looking around the room.
Yeah, that's
Vince Gill
so
said, he says, the most people I've ever been ignored by.
That is, yeah.
But it's awesome, man. It's so cool. And those songs are so, they're so iconic. And it's a challenge for me because everybody knows every note of those songs. It's not like I'm up there improvising. Joe gets to take some extended solos at the end of like, Fast Lane or In the City or something where he just goes and we let Joe just go. And it's like, cool. But I'm very much playing what's on the records, with all those guitar players, Bernie Ledden, Don Felder, and stuff that Stewart did too. Those were perfect guitar parts.
Mm-hmm.
I would never dream of playing Hotel California and not playing it note for note. It's like, that's like, I feel like the fans would riot.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's a song in particular that like everybody knows, even the non-fans know that lead part,
Yeah. But it's like that with all those songs because every song, I play the solo in One of These Nights and it's like, I don't change a note. Yeah. That's a perfect solo. I play all the fills in Lion Eyes and Tequila Sunrise, Peaceful Easy Feeling, the solos in that, and New Kid in Town. Like it's every melody was so well crafted that I don't need to put my own stamp on it. I'm there to serve them. I'm there to serve their songs.
Sure. Have you had the opportunity to have like discussions with the other guys like about intentions when they wrote the song or anything like that?
Every once in a while, we would, I've known Don a number of years now, so there would be times where, we'd just be talking about an arrangement of something and he'd drop a little, we were trying to sound like this when we did that, or we were listening to this, and that's cool. That's really cool when you get a little behind the scenes or,
sure.
that's always fascinating stuff. But those guys were very, very meticulous with their craft. They worked really hard making those records.
Right.
There's a reason those songs have stood the test of time for 50 years.
Yeah, totally.
Absolute song craft.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've gone way over, which is fine. But I'll cut something out in the middle. I just want to end it with like, how do you see your near and distant future with, balancing Eagles, knobs, solo stuff?
Well, I know that this stuff won't last forever. It could all end tomorrow. But I hope that both the knobs and the Eagles will keep going. I would love for it to last, as long as they want to keep going. I think the fans love Mike. The fans love the Eagles. I think that both fan bases would love to see them continue for years. And I will be on board as long as they will have me. But I am excited that I've got, I'm halfway through making another solo album. I'm doing it here again. And the new album, Milky Way, is very dense production. There's a shitload of parts on it. This new one is going to be completely stripped down. It's almost entirely acoustic. It's very much, it's like a Nick Drake record, So I'm just going the polar opposite direction with this new one, just to be different,
Nice.
So I'm excited about that. I the point of that is that I am hoping that I can keep making solo records and maybe building there's a little bit of an increase in audience interest for me now, and I want that to continue. So, as long as my hearing is still good, and as long as I can still sing close to pitch, then I want to keep doing this as long as I possibly can. And I'll always write songs and try to record them. So hopefully there will be people that will listen, and hopefully all these amazing, surreal gigs that I have as a guitar player will continue also. I just want to keep doing this as long as I can.
Yeah, it's an amazing run, and we all hope for it to continue.
Oh, thank you, man. I'm having a lot of fun for sure.
Right on. Well, hey, thanks for being on. Thanks for having me over. We'll have links to stuff. There's a Kessler show. We'll
the Kessler show is May 16th.
Yeah, it's gonna be right before that.
And I've got a full band for the first time in a long time.
Nice.
Playing my material.
Excellent.
And that's the only show we have on the books at the moment, because I'm going back out with the Knobs this summer. Okay. And then I'm back with the Eagles at the Sphere in September.
Wow.
So, so there's I don't have any time to do a tour or anything.
Exactly.
So we're going to do this one show at the Kessler, and we're going to blow it out. Hopefully it's going to be great.
Excellent. Thanks again, Chris.
Dude, thank you, Andrew.
I'd like to thank Christopher Holt for joining us. You heard That Magic Feeling off his new album, Across the Universe, which is out today. We've got all the links for everything for Christopher in the show notes. Opening theme song, Salim Nirala, Unstoppable, and the closing theme song, Electric Ants, The Place to Be. Thank you to the Mullen & Mullen Music Project for supporting this podcast. We'd also like to thank the Deep Ellum Community Center for letting us record there. You can catch the Dallas Famous podcast every Sunday at 1 o'clock on Deep Ellum Radio, and then Wednesday on all the podcast platforms. Please like, subscribe, enjoy, share, all the good things. We'll see you next time.